So, okay, you got yours? All right, so we have a lot to do today. I'm going to collect these from you guys. Then we have another presentation on the sales program. So you get another perspective on sales, even though some of you have already chosen the sales major. Redundancy is good. And then we'll do student evaluations after they finish their presentation. And then we'll talk about products. So you guys are, I guess I'll let you finish while they're talking. Looks like some of you are still writing stuff in. So this is Andrew and Tanner. So pay attention. All right, go ahead.
All right, as I said, my name is Andrew. This is.
I'm Tanner Hamilton.
All right, today we're going to talk to you about why you should major in professional sales here at UCF. All right, so I just want to ask you guys, what are you guys looking for in a career? Just kind of give me some things that you guys are looking for.
Financial stability.
All right.
Money, okay.
Well,
Move it up.
Yeah, so. All right.
Anything else?
Something that you enjoy.
So passion?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Is there anything else you guys have?
This is money.
Money. So stability and
What is it called?
advancement. You want to do something you enjoy. So is there anything else you guys are looking for when you're going out and looking for your jobs out of college? Get flexible. All right, so yeah, those are definitely some good things that you're looking for in a job. All right, now we have one more question for you. Now when you hear the word salesperson, what are some things that come to mind?
Ourselves.
Annoying.
Annoying? We hope not to be annoying.
Liar.
Okay.
What was yours? Persistence? That's a good one.
Convincing.
Convincing.
All right. So now Tanner is going to tell you a little bit about his internship and how he views sales after going through the internship he's in right now.
Okay, so right now I'm actually interning for a company called Tom James. What we do is basically sell custom clothing, so suits, slacks, casual wear, custom clothes, things like that. As a salesman for that company, basically they're going to prospect. So prospecting is basically just trying to find anybody that has a need for that product and has the financial capabilities of purchasing that product, and more than anything, a want to purchase that product. Some of these key points that y'all mentioned: stability, advancement. What was that second? Oh, enjoy and flexible. Those are pretty much all things that you can get out of a sales career. One big one that I don't see on there is freedom. As a salesperson, you kind of get to pick what you want, like how hard you want to work, when you want to work, what time you want to work. That's a big reason why I went into sales. Is you can make as much money as you want. It all depends on your work ethic and what you want to do with your career. Different sales jobs are all different. There's sales jobs where you're gonna have huge sales and you're gonna work for months at a time trying to make one huge sell. If that's something that you could be into and work at a long period of time and not make much money until that one big hit and you make a lot of money off of it, then that could be a good thing. Or also, there's different ones where you can, on a daily, consistent basis, you're seeing consistent income, and that's where the stability comes in. With Tom James, basically, every single day you're calling on new people. You're calling on new people trying to make sales. And it's basically just, it's a numbers game, but the rewards are really high. There's a lot of place for advancement in sales. the guy that's actually training me right now, he's actually moving to LA in the end of May. He actually got offered an opportunity to be the leader of the sales team here, and he's probably making like 100 to 150,000 a year now. And that opportunity would have made him probably like $200 to $250,000, and he turned it down. You know, just because he wants to go to LA, bigger market, way more people, just a bigger opportunity to make a lot more money. There's only 2 people in their company in the office in LA right now, and he just sees the opportunity for how much income he can make, and he's not getting any younger, so you know he wants to go to LA. LA's a good place to live. But yeah, I'll let Andrew talk about some other stuff. More of the character traits of what people think about salesmen.
And so yeah, you know, when you do a salesman, it's kind of easy to get, you know, the pushy car salesman mentality. But that's really, when you're looking at a career in sales, that's not what salespeople are. You know, when they're gonna train you to be someone that's really concerned about the needs of your clients, you know, you'll be kind of like we did to you guys. You'll be asking them questions, figuring out how to fit their needs, figuring out how to work with them so that the product you're selling can fit their needs. You know, you're selling now isn't what it used to be. You know, it's not where you're sitting at the state fair and you see the guy do his presentation of buy my product, and a week from now he's gone. He doesn't care if you're happy or not. Selling today is really, especially in the business world, is really about what kind of relationships can you build. You know, you're going to have your clients, and you need to be able to build a relationship not only to acquire them, but to keep them long term. And so selling really, to me, selling is about honesty. You know, it's about forming that relationship with people. You know, it's about growth. You know, you have a potential to grow. You know, it's really about, you're the go-between between you and that client for your company. You know, you're the one that's representing them and their interests. So, you know, it's really about responsibility. You know, salespeople are responsible, good at time management. You know, that's really what sales, to me, when you say salesperson to me, that's really what a salesperson it is. And someone with very high income potential. You know, in sales, you're gonna make, you have potential to make as much as you want, especially in commission-based jobs where, you know, it's how much you're willing to put in, it's how much you can make. And you really, truly have unlimited earning potential in some of the sales jobs you can get. You know, you're not capped at a certain amount no matter how good you do. You know, this is a job where you really control your salary. You're in control of what happens to you. It's not the guy above you, it's you. You know, it's what you want to do, how hard you want to work. And that is really something that's determined by you. So if you really like being in charge of how you do and what you make, sales is definitely a career for you. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of information on the UCO Professional Sales Program. Up here, we have the degree sheet, so these are the classes you would take. You need to get the professional sales degree. UCO is one of less than 40 colleges in the country to offer a professional sales major, and we're the only one in the state of Oklahoma. Now, when you're going and looking for a sales job, and you can put professional sales major on your resume, that's huge. That's a lot of the things, that's something that the people graduating from OU, OSU, Oklahoma Christian, some of the other local colleges around here that are applying for the same jobs as you are, that's something they can't say. You know, their major may be marketing, which is still good, but it's not professional selling. You know, that tells the company they're not going to have to train you as much on the sales side of things as they would this other person. That's going to make you valuable to them. They're going to see that professional sales major on your resume and call you because you have that designation rather than calling someone else. So it's definitely something big to have. You know, this is really a unique opportunity that UCO offers. You know, and you can make a lot of money your first year out. You know, especially if you can build your client base. You know, this is a job where you can't. You know, you're not gonna make $35,000 your first year out. You know, if you can get on with a good, you know, you can get on with a good company, it's 100% job placement. Only major, I believe other than nursing, I can say that 100% of the people in that major get placed in a job in their field. And so, you know, you have this unlimited income potential. You really do have the freedom. You have the freedom to set your own schedule. So, so it's great for someone with a family. Because there's a lot of sales jobs that don't travel, that are more of a local area, and you can determine your own schedule, you know. So you can go to your son's baseball game, or you can go to your daughter's dance recital, and you don't have to worry about implications in your job. You know, you can work at a different time that fits your needs and your schedule. So that's really why, to me, sales is it's a great opportunity. You know, because I was sitting in your chair. When I was a couple years ago, I wasn't a sales major. I transferred in because of Dr. Aguirre and a presentation I heard on professional sales. So, I mean, I was, for those of you that aren't a professional sales major, I was sitting in your shoes. Someone that, you know, didn't really understand all the opportunities available to salespeople. And once I heard it, I switched majors, and that's probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, was switching to that major. So is there any questions you guys have?
Another thing I'd like to touch on is the great thing that I really noticed just about my internship within a sales career is the amount of people that you meet. It's crazy. I've met so many high people in the food chain. Just working for a month, I've met people from Chesapeake, several VPs from Chesapeake, from Devon. I went on a presentation with the guy, with my trainer Ryan, to a financial investor. We talked to him for a little bit, and he was talking about a big company that they just started working with, Block Supply. And I just threw out there, oh, that's crazy, my dad works there. To where they asked, well, who's your dad? Which, thinking you probably wouldn't know who my dad was. They actually did. My dad's planning on investing in 401k, like now. And he said that he was actually meeting with him on Thursday, which was really cool. I talked to my dad actually the next week, and he ended up calling me and said, hey, do you know so-and-so? And it was the guy that I met. And the guy was really impressed by me, I guess, in the meeting. And he said, if it doesn't work out with Tom James, just have him give me a call, and I'll give him an opportunity here. You know, even if the sales job doesn't work out, you meet so many people that can affect your life. And with sales, like he said, it's 100% placement. You're gonna have a job everywhere. Sales, there's never not gonna be a job in sales. It's crazy because you can move, and like what our professor has said, that you don't really want to plan for your whole career when you're coming out of college. No one's gonna ever have one job, the first job out of college, and have that job for the rest of their life. So plan for short term, what's gonna make you happy now, the next year or two. And if in sales, if you do that, I think that if you have a positive outlook on what you're doing and truly love what you're doing, people will see that, and there's so many other opportunities that can come out from being in the sales program and joining that career. So.
Is there anyone that has any questions? Thanks.
You don't have a
Can I, when do you, I can bring it to office.
You can read by it Thursday, and that's on it. Okay. Thank you. All right, so today we need to talk about products, one of the 4 P's. So we organized the discipline of marketing around the 4 P's. There have been articles written recently that suggest that we should expand the number of P's beyond the 4 that we have. What are the 4 P's that we organize marketing around? Product, price, place, and promotion. There are people who say that we should expand that to 3 more P's. We should talk about planet, people, and profits as well. But a big portion of marketing and marketing thought is organized around these 4 P's. When we talk about products, when we talk about marketing, because it is a pervasive social activity, we have to think broadly in terms of products. It's not just tangible products It's also ideas, services that we can sell. We can use marketing in a variety of contexts in the political marketplace. The product is the candidate himself and the ideas that he espouses. And so we have a big event today. What is it? What's today's vote? Political marketplace. They're the New York primaries, so we'll see if Donald Trump can win all 95 of the delegates needed to help further secure his election. And Hillary, of course, will probably defeat Bernie Sanders, although nationally they're neck and neck in the most recent polls. There's only a difference of 2 points. So that's a product in the political marketplace. We can talk about services, which are intangible things that are becoming a huge part of our economy. So what are some of the ethical issues that we can have with regard to products? Well, with regard to tangible products, we can have all kinds of things like safety issues, which this is an intersection, and when we talk about environmental scanning in the marketplace, one of those things that we have to think about in the environmental scan is what? Regulatory. So for a long period of time at the common law, your text tells you that the marketing of products was governed by the doctrine of caveat emptor. Which means what? What does the text tell you that means? Let the buyer beware. Now, if we went back again in time, marketing as an activity has existed from the earliest civilizations. From the moment we leave behind what might be called the primitive psyche and form societies, we have engaged in a marketing activity. Maybe very basic in terms of I'm going to sell my eggs and my milk that I have from my farm at the local market, to the complex post-modern, highly industrial, and even post-industrial world. But for a big portion of human history, it wasn't necessarily all that complex. And people could evaluate the goods that they bought. If you were thinking about, for example, textiles and clothing, can you probably evaluate the quality of that product? You're shaking your head yes. How can you evaluate the quality of products like clothing and textiles?
Fiber content, fabric, fabric,
Okay.
and knowing what they are.
So if we go back in time, most clothes are made out of natural, and I don't know what they mean by synthetic or unnatural clothing, because technically it's still a product that came from the earth. Most of your synthetics, like polyester, come from what? Huh? Yeah, petroleum.
Yeah.
Petroleum-based products. So you said you could look at it. How could you tell the difference if you went back in time between, say, what are the fabrics that before we started inventing synthetics that you could have? What are the natural sort of fabrics? Cotton, linen, what?
Linen, fiber.
Linen is flax, silk. What else? Some type of animal skin, leather, hide. Could you tell the difference between, say, cotton product and a linen product, or flax product, or silk? Probably. You could tell the difference between those. What's the advantage of certain types of products? Cotton, for example. It's durable. It's what?
It's dying.
Okay. It's rather lightweight. So you could evaluate that, and you're going to look at things like you said, the stitching, the thread count. You evaluate sheets based on what? Thread count. And can you tell the difference between, say, I don't know, 150 thread count and 300 thread count. All right, look at the stitching and see if it's well made, if it's gonna last. You can evaluate all of those things fairly easily, and it's a product that doesn't involve a great amount of risk. Although, maybe it does, more so than we think. Once we get into industrial manufacturing of these things and we come up with synthetics, one of the things that happened is, for example, they were making nightgowns for children out of products that were highly flammable. Could that be a danger? Would most people be able to evaluate that without experiencing it going up in flames? Well, it may become harder. So for a long time we had this idea that because you could evaluate products, let the buyer beware, caveat emptor. And that worked pretty well until we become an industrial and a post-industrial society. And so the law begins to change. And you see this in things like railroad turntable cases at the common law. So again, along with caveat emptor, the idea at Anglo-American jurisprudence was that, you didn't owe a lot of duty to people. You'd take your stuff to the local market, you'd sell it, you could do what you want with your property. Property rights are something that are enormously important in the United States. And so, along with caveat emptor, yeah.
Well, couldn't you just the products you can evaluate, couldn't you just review them? Since they have reviews or product reviews, and that way you can evaluate the product.
Okay, but who's going to review it?
Well, you can read reviews that people have already.
Okay. The beginning of the Industrial Revolution. We think about this being very easy in the day of technology where you all have this thing that's attached to your hand constantly, and you can do what? If you don't know about something, it's become actually a verb. Google. I'm going to Google it and look it up. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, could you do that? No? So how did consumers get information? Well, the government starts to insist that we start providing that kind of information, and you get more regulation. So we moved from caveat emptor, and another principle that we had at common law was that trespassers, for example, were owed no duty. And what ends up happening is that we start to see a shift in the legal environment in response to this idea that we can no longer just evaluate most of the things that we take or use on a daily basis with the ease that we used to in the past. So we move from caveat emptor, and we also move from this idea of no duty being owed to more and more duties being imposed. And so, again, you see this in areas like the railroad turntable cases. During the Industrial Revolution, what happens to our society? So before the Industrial Revolution, if we went back, and really, if we think about this, in terms of the course of human history, this is not a huge length of time, is it? When did the Industrial Revolution really begin? When did it start taking off? At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, when we start to see a big, movement towards mass production of things like the Ford Model T. So about 120 years ago is when we start to see this movement and scientific management come into being. And what happens to the population? So if we went back in time, so Oklahoma, for example, is founded right around this time. The Land Run, we're about to have the annual celebration in my hometown marking this historic event. How was Oklahoma Territory settled? The unassigned lands were settled by Land Run. And the first Land Run began when? for Oklahoma Territory. Why did we decide we were going to open the quote-unquote unassigned lands for settlement? One of the reasons that the Indians lost part of Oklahoma was sort of as punishment for their siding with the South in the Civil War. The 5 civilized tribes, and this has actually become an issue recently with some of the tribes, particularly the Cherokees, who had slaves, unowned slaves, and there were these black Cherokees. And so the issue of who should be on the tribal roll has been one of the most recent controversies. So we settled as part of the punishment for the 5 civilized tribes siding with the South in the Civil War. We opened the unassigned lands in Oklahoma up to settlement. So we had 2 territories. We had Indian Territory, and then we had what was called Oklahoma Territory. And the first run occurs on April 22nd this month. In fact, if you want to come up to my hometown this weekend, they'll have a big festival and a parade marking the anniversary of the first land run and the settlement of Oklahoma Territory on April 22nd, 1889. So we opened Oklahoma up for settlement, and at that point in time, that's sort of the end of the Victorian era, beginning of the Edwardian, and the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. As we industrialize, what happens to our population? What were most people, if you went back to April 22nd, 1889, and the land run, what did people come here to settle for? Farmlands, they came to farm. So we were largely a rural population, and after the Industrial Revolution, what happens to the population? Well, it migrates from the rural areas into the more urban areas because that's where the jobs and the economic development are occurring in the factories. And so around these factories at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, railroads popped up and towns popped up along centers with railroads. Why? Well, if you're going to mass produce goods now, you're not going to go necessarily to market to buy all of your goods. We're going to have mass produced, homogenized goods for the population in things like factories. How are you going to get those goods to the people where they live? Well, you have to have some way of shipping them. So we get the railroads popping up and towns popping up along these railroads and factories being located around transportation centers where they can get goods to the rest of the nation easily. Well, if you lived out on 40 acres and had your horse and cow and chickens and things like that, you probably watched your kids. And you knew a lot about where your kids were because they were helping out on the farm. That's one of the reasons in a holdover of our agricultural era, pre-industrial era, is this idea of summer break. Why did they have summer break from school? Is it a good idea, by the way, to have summer break? You think so? You're shaking your head yes. Pedagogical studies seem to suggest that it's really not a great idea because students unlearn a whole bunch of stuff over the summer break. But why did we have it? Well, you needed kids to go out, and it starts about the time that you would start planting and then harvesting through the summer and working on the farm. And so you probably kept a pretty close eye on your kids and stuff like that. When you start moving into the cities, what happens? Well, parents are no longer working on the farm, they're going to work, and kids are really, really creative. And so there were these things that were put on railroad sites that allowed them to turn the engines around. So in the early days of the trains, the engines didn't go forward and backward, they went one direction. So you didn't just get to the end of the line and then dump the engine, forget about it, you put it on a turntable and you spin it around and then you can head it back down the track the other way. You can still see these turntables or remnants of this in San Francisco if you've ever been, the streetcars there. They have these turntables in the middle of the street when they get to the end of a trolley line for some of them, where they'll turn them, the conductor will jump out, they'll stick a key into this device, they'll put the turntable on and it will move around. Well, what does this device look like to kids? So it's this thing that spins around, and what do you think kids think about that are near these railroads as their parents have moved from the country and into the city? I can tell you all have never experienced this. A carousel? How about a merry-go-round? Merry-go-round. How many of you had a merry-go-round? They've taken them off of the playgrounds now because they're what? They're dangerous. This is a dangerous little device. When I was growing up, that was, whoa, big fun. You'd get on the merry-go-round and you'd get going real fast and you'd see how far you could throw your friends, It's spinning really, really fast and how far they'd go. Well, that's what this device looks like. Well, it's inherently dangerous. And so we went from this common law concept of trespassers, for example, were owed no duty, to now saying, well, maybe if you bring something on your property that is attractive to children and is inherently dangerous, and you can monitor or you can take care of it without a whole lot of expense and keep people from losing their fingers and hands and toes in this, you're going to owe them a duty. So, along with caveat emptor, we start seeing more and more duties being imposed on businesses and people with regard to the products that they use and develop and employ. And so we go from no duty owed to trespassers to maybe we owe some duty to trespassers. The common law rule was trespassers are evildoers. That's a tort. You're a dirty dog tortfeasor if you trespass on somebody's land. To saying, well, maybe it's natural for children to be attracted to these things, and so we're going to start imposing a duty on you. And similarly with other products. And this becomes the doctrine of negligence. It morphs into the doctrine of negligence, and then we see transformation into strict products liability. So with regard to this idea of attractive nuisances, where else do we see this being applied? So we start out with railroad turntables and industrial type lots. How many of you have a swimming pool? What do you have to do with your swimming pool? Can you just throw the swimming pool out there?
You gate it,
You have to gate it. Why?
like kids can't go inside.
So the kids can't go in and drown in your pool. You have a duty that you owe, so you can't just put the swimming pool out there and leave it unprotected, because what will happen? Every kid in the neighborhood will start coming over and you need to maybe protect them. We've now taken this to an even more extreme form in places like Florida, where they insist that not only does the pool have to have a fence or a gate around it, but they actually enclose the whole thing. It has to have a total enclosure over the entire property. So we move to more and more duties being imposed, and we move away from this idea of caveat emptor and towards a theory of negligence. Now, what's involved in a theory of negligence? So if we're going to now say we have a duty, what do we have to have negligence? So we're now going to say we're not just going to allow you to make products and escape any liability for putting them out there. You're now going to owe a duty to make reasonably safe products. Again, in the past, no duty was owed. The idea was you had a duty as a consumer to inspect and know about the products that you were buying. And if you were fool enough to believe somebody's pitch, well, too bad for you. Cher actually sings a song about this called Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, about, you know, the stuff that they would sell out of the back of the sort of carnival wagon, all kinds of products that would cure everything from cancer to baldness were being sold. And consumers really can't evaluate that, can they? Can you evaluate the safety, for example, of a drug? No, you can't. Why not? Why can't you evaluate the safety of a drug? What do you have to know whether or not a drug is safe?
You have to wait till someone consumes it?
Yeah, you have to do some kind of trial. And so if we just let manufacturers produce this stuff, you know, without any sort of trial and just put it out there on the market, what could happen? And what did happen to people that would buy these things, these products? Well, if you were lucky, it maybe just didn't work. But if you were not so lucky, what might have happened? It might have killed you. And could you be in a position really to evaluate whether or not that product was safe? Probably not, because in order to do that, you're going to have a medical degree or a degree in pharmacology or things like that. So we start moving towards away from caveat emptor and away from trespassers or owed no duty to this theory of negligence. So the first thing that you have to have, so this is an elements test under the theory of negligence. The first thing you have is we start imposing a duty. You have a duty to manufacture products in a reasonably safe fashion. So with regard to these things like the railroad turntables, what do you have to do? What is the owner of these devices going to have to do? You're going to have to put on some kind of mechanism that locks it, that keeps it from letting little kids get on it and use it as a merry-go-round or a carousel. So we have duty, then we have breach of duty, injury, and then causation, which is both cause and fact and legal causation. So we start saying you have a duty to manufacture products in a relatively safe fashion. I used drugs as an example. What does it mean to manufacture drugs in a reasonably safe fashion? What are you going to have to do? That we're going to impose a duty on you.
Go through the FDA.
You're going to have to go through the FDA. And in order to get FDA approval, what are you going to have to do? So you come up with this product that you think will cure some disease. You're going to have clinical trials. Probably start out with trying it on what? Animals. Start out trying it on lab rats to see if it actually is effective. Things like the reduction of cancer. Then go through informed consent and clinical trials on humans until you get it to the point where they know all the known side effects, or most of the side effects, and we know that it's reasonably safe for human consumption for various things. Now, is any product 100% safe? No. How many of you got a flu shot this year? It's always amazing to me, only one student gets a flu shot. How many of you didn't get a flu shot? The vast majority. Why didn't you get the flu shot? You what?
I don't wanna get the flu.
Should a flu shot?
Yeah, the flu shot does not give you the flu.
I just know more people than not that like when they get the flu shot, they end up getting the flu and are like violently ill for like a long time. Or they get the flu like more times than not.
Okay, what's the problem with that argument? It's a logical fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc. You assume causation too readily in time because your friends got the flu after. The flu shot only they come out with it every year and they think that it's the most common strain of the flu that you're going to get. And some years they get it wrong, but there's a certain number of people that are going to react poorly to the flu shot that may die if they take it. My cousin has a horrible allergy to eggs. If she eats an egg, she starts swelling up, she gets hives all over her face, gets blotchy, and guess what they use to manufacture most of the flu vaccines? Well, they use eggs because it's called avian flu for the most part, and so, you know, if she gets a flu shot, it might kill her. That's going to happen with some products. Not every product is going to, and there's side effects to everything, but we have to make sure that it's reasonably safe. And that's one of the reasons why, for those of you who've gotten a flu shot, the first time you got it, how many times have you had it?
Well, it's my first time that I
Okay. So she didn't give you a choice, she just said you're going to get the flu shot. And did they make you sit there for 15 minutes? They're supposed to. If you've never taken the flu shot before, one of the things they're supposed to do is they're supposed to sit there, make you sit there and make sure that you don't go into anaphylaxis. Because you could have this reaction to it, in which case they're going to have to hit you with the EpiPen and, you know, hopefully counteract the negative reaction. So we start imposing these duties. We say you're going to have to manufacture drugs and all kinds of things in a relatively safe manner. Then you have a breach of duty that causes injury to the plaintiff by the acts of the defendant in causation. This is what we call at law an elements test. And it's important because elements as opposed to factors tests, and we're going to see the intersection of both an elements and a factors test in here, in this idea of negligence. Now, an elements test is hard, which means that you have to meet every single element of the test. So, in order to be found liable at tort, in tort law, for the bad manufacturing of some drug that you put out there or some product that's unsafe, first of all, we have to say you have a duty. Where does this duty come from? Well, it's imposed generally by the regulatory scheme. There has to be some breach of the duty. Now, this is where you're actually going to get an intersection of a factors test. Because you have a duty to act in a reasonably prudent manner as a reasonably prudent drug manufacturer, for example, in the case of drugs, would perform. Now, what are the factors that are involved in that? Well, we say this is science, and you have to go through the steps of proving the efficacy of the drug and the safety of the drug. Now, how do we judge whether or not, well, that's a factors test. It's a reasonable person test. Would a reasonable manufacturer in same or similar circumstances behave in the way that you behave? This breach of the duty that causes injury to the plaintiff, and that the injury is in fact caused by the breach. So you have to meet each one of these in order to be found guilty of tort negligence under the doctrine of negligence in the manufacturing of products and things like that. What is causation? Causation is both cause and fact, which is generally determined by the but-for test, and also legal causation. So what's the but-for test? But for the negligent act of the defendant, plaintiff would not have been injured. But that may be too attenuated, and so we also get this idea of proximate cause. Because if you had any kind of but-for that allowed for infinite regress to the point of, say, creation, well, you could say that but for the fact that their mama gave birth to them, they wouldn't have been injured, right? So we also have to have proximate or causation that is temporally connected with the breach that causes the injury. And the seminal case there is the Falls Graft versus the Long Island Railroad case. And I think I've talked about this before. So what happens in that case is, and just to refresh your memory, Mrs. Falls Graft is standing on the platform of the train station when a gentleman is running to catch a train. He's got a package in his arms, and he jumps on this train that's pulling away from the station, and this steward gives him a little shove, and when he shoves him, it causes the package to fall. The package contains explosives, and the explosion, because of the sound wave reverberation, causes these scales that are located on a wall to fall off the wall and hit Mrs. Falls Graft in the head. And of course she sues the railroad and says, but for the negligent act of your actor, your agent, I would not have been injured. And the court says, well, that's true, but it's not reasonably foreseeable. And so that doesn't meet the proximate or legal causation. But for the act of the agent pushing the gentleman onto the train and then dropping the package, no, she would not have been injured, but that's too attenuated. Duty has to be reasonably foreseeable in order to be imposed. And no one would reasonably foresee that somebody who's about to fall off a train that he's jumping on would be carrying a package of explosions that might go off and cause these scales at the other end of the platform to hit Mrs. Falls Graft on the head. And so they don't award her damages in that based on this idea of the proximate or legal cause of the injury. Now, students generally like this idea of negligence with regard to products. We understand that. You have a duty to manufacture things that are reasonably safe. And most of the time, that works out pretty well. We go about our daily lives and we don't get injured, and the products that we take are, for the most part, reasonably safe. The flu shots that you get don't actually give you the flu. They don't cause anaphylaxis in the vast majority of cases. But there are these cases that fall through the cracks, and we can say that we have a reasonably prudent manufacturer of a product, but some injury still occurs as a result of that. So we move not just from caveat emptor to a theory of negligence, but we move beyond negligence to a theory called strict products liability. And what does strict products liability say? Well, it no longer rests on this reasonably prudent manufacturer or this factors test. All it says is what? What is strict products? Now, this is the one that business students really hate. Why? Because it says that if you manufacture a product and somebody is injured, you will be strictly liable for it. And that's what the railroad turntable cases actually come up with, is that we're going to impose strict liability if you have this attractive nuisance on your property, which has led to all sorts of things like swimming pools having to be enclosed. And if you go to law school, you start debating these things in a great amount of detail. So, for example, I had a debate with one of my friends in law school. We went to the Philbrook in Tulsa, and this was an old mansion. There's a big fountain out there. Do you have to rope off the fountain? His response was no. I was kind of thinking, do people like to play in fountains? Are kids attracted to it? Is the response was, it's not a swimming pool. Well, it's kind of like a swimming pool. It's got water. You could drown in it. So we moved to this idea of strict products liability. Now, why is it the business students don't like this idea of strict products liability? We sort of like the theory of negligence because we understand, like, you have a duty to not put products out there that are going to be inherently dangerous, and you should take every precaution. But having said that, a certain number of people who get the flu shot are going to die, maybe, or have a bad reaction to it. Now, if you go into anaphylaxis from the flu shot and they make you sit there, it's probably pretty easy to cure. They're going to hit you with the EpiPen, and you're going to be okay. But what about those times when it's not just that simple? What should we do for those cases that fall through the crack? When we say a manufacturer, when we say Merck, for example, a major manufacturer of drugs, has put out a product, and a certain number of people have had really bad reactions to it, and they've suffered irreparable harm. And a lot of the products that we use every day, you could suffer irreparable harm. I was talking about my friend Grant who took Ambien, and his wife said, if you ever take it again, I'm going to divorce you, because he was up at 3 in the morning frying bacon and setting the house on fire and didn't even realize that he was going to do that. If he had set the house on fire, by the way, he probably could have recovered under the theory of strict products liability from the manufacturer of that drug. Now, why is it that business students don't like that theory, that you're going to be able to recover with something like that?
Someone could take advantage of that?
Yeah, it doesn't seem fair, and it seems like people could take advantage of this idea that you're going to be required to be strictly liable. So strict products liability moves even beyond this idea of negligence. So we go from caveat emptor to negligence to this idea of strict products liability. Now, with regard to strict products liability, what theory of ethics do we use it? So Anglo-American jurisprudence has largely been predicated on two grounds for making decisions. One is a duty or a deontological ethics base, and the other is teleological or utilitarian. Which theory supports strict products liability? Duty, deontological, or utilitarian ethics? Teleological. You said duty. Why do you think it's duty?
Because it's sort of like you have to have, it's your duty to take care of whatever you messed up, instead of it being the ends.
Justifying the means. Okay, but strict products liability, what does strict products liability do? It removes the reasonable person standard and the duty. We just say you're liable if you produce a product that's, they no longer have to prove that you acted in an unreasonable fashion under the duty standard of care, which is a reasonably prudent person. So you said it's teleological. Why do you think it's teleological? Who's in a better position to pay? Go ahead.
Well, like if the consumer is using the product in a way that's not, it's designated for, then would the company still be liable if they were to get injured by it? If I like take Ambien for example, that's a sleeping pill, right?
Right.
If you take it and you don't go to sleep and something happens, you harm yourself or you burn down the house, would the company be held responsible even though the consumer wasn't using it properly?
So how did the consumer use it improperly?
By staying up and not going to sleep.
By staying up and down, okay. A lot of people who take Ambien, one of the side effects is they don't remember they don't remember what happens. They have a blackout, basically. Yeah, they're awake, maybe, but they have a blackout. I guess you could use it improperly by, one of the things that they usually tell you with a lot of drugs? Oh, don't what? Don't drink with this product. That could be really bad. In fact, the number of people that are dying from overdoses of legal drugs has increased exponentially in recent history. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're doing what? They're not just taking the legal drug, like the Ambien or whatever, they're also mixing it with alcohol, which tends to increase the toxicity level of things like that. And so, it's a utilitarian theory that supports strict products liability, because the idea is who's in the better position to pay? The company. The company who has billions of dollars is in a better position to absorb the loss than the individual. I'm about out of time, but what we'll do is we'll talk about next time, and you should maybe Google this, the DES case, diethylstilbestrol, DES, and we'll talk about that with regard to this idea of products liability, and then we'll talk about place. The next week, I want you to, in your groups, think about an ad that you liked. We'll talk about promotion and then pricing in the following week. So think about an ad that you want to view for a critical thinking challenge in your groups and why you think the ad is great. All right?